Welcome to today's session of the Business and Trade Committee as we pursue our inquiries into the state of the EU and United States trade relationship. So Chris, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you for bringing Kate Joseph and Amanda Brooks together with you. Perhaps I could just open by reflecting on last Tuesday's spring statement, because that obviously showed quite a significant deterioration in the trade outlook for the country. We've got a widening of the trade deficit now forecast for the next few years. And of course, since then, the European Union has proposed the final text of its Industrial Accelerator Act, which the SMMT says is a real threat to us. And alongside that, President Trump has torched the special relationship with a series of attacks on the Prime Minister. Why is the outlook for the UK trade picture deteriorating over the next few years? And is it likely to get worse given the events of the last week, including the conflict in Iran?
I don't think it is going to get worse in the kind of cataclysmic version that you sort of laid out there, but I'll go through the individual issues if I might. Let me just start with the Accelerator Act. Obviously this is a draft, it's a first draft, you know the process is through the European Union. We had been engaging with the European Union for some time on this issue of Made in Europe, because not only for the British argument, but as I've spoken to many of my counterparts in other capital cities in Europe, they've made the point that their aeroplanes, their automotives, many of them are made partly in the UK. So if you exclude the UK from Made in Europe, then you're going to provide significant long-term problems for the whole of the economy of Europe, which is why I was glad that in the main, in most elements of the Act, it was much better than we had originally anticipated, and I think that that's a result of significant lobbying, partly by the Secretary of State, a little bit by myself, and by the whole of the team working in all the member states, as well as working with the
Mike Hawes says, as drafted, it would discriminate against UK-made vehicles and components, damaging a trading relationship worth £70 billion annually.
Yes,
Willie Baines from the Chamber of Commerce says the rules could have considerably more impact upon cross-border trade and investment in automotives and climate change technology. So hasn't the lobbying failed?
No, I was going to come on to the point about automotives because I met with Willie Bain and others and the SMMT on Thursday afternoon, I think, the day after the Accelerator Act had come out, or maybe on the Wednesday, I can't remember, one or other. And they made these points, and we've registered those points as well. We need to make sure that we win the whole of this campaign all the way through until the eventual legislation. But in particular, one of the issues for their automotives is that if they don't have access, if UK manufacture isn't part of European manufacture qualifying for instance, fleets, then that's a significant problem for the automotive sector. We're very focused on that. I've always said that this will be a campaign all the way through to the end. And anything that the committee can do to help us win that argument in Europe is good. There is a move towards protectionism, everywhere in the world, and we face it sometimes in the UK as well. And I'm determined to make sure that move towards protectionism in Europe doesn't rule us out.
The Chancellor, in a speech for which the text is not published, reputedly said to Bruegel that further integration will require further alignment, and I'm up for that. We are keen to go through at sectoral level what sectors we should have alignment in. I mean, it looks like this new proposal from the European Union has just scuppered that strategy.
No, I don't accept that, and that's certainly not the view when I've spoken to my German counterpart. I could go through a list. I'm quite happy to provide the list if that's something that's useful to you of the other countries that we've spoken to. But I mean, for instance, in relation to an aeroplane, what is a European aeroplane? When any of the European countries go around the world trying to persuade countries to buy Airbus, 30% of the airplane is likely to be made in the UK because the wings will have been here, or the engines might have been made by Rolls-Royce here, and so on. And you can repeat that on so many different parts of manufacture across the whole of Europe. So I think this is an argument that Europe needs to have a bit with itself, and I'm very confident that if we put the campaign together correctly, then we can win that. Just to go to your other question, I'm still going back to the original question. So
let's go back to the United States, because in February this year, Varun Chandra said that he was hopeful the UK-US economic prosperity deal will move to a conclusion in the first half of 2026. Judging from President Trump's Truth Social account and his interview with The Sun, it looks like that ambition's dead.
I don't accept that. I haven't seen, I've not had any indication from anybody, nor has anybody in the department from the United States of America that the process that we're engaged in at the moment of trying to secure the best economic prosperity deal for the UK isn't on track.
The President said to The Sun on the 3rd of March, it's very sad to see that the relationship is obviously not what it was. He then went on to say that this was the most solid relationship of all, but now we have strong relationships with other countries. The UK, our once great ally, we will remember, was the threat he issued.
Yes, I don't think he was talking about our trading relationship, but and I'm not a commentator in this. I'm a player in this field, and my aim is to deliver the best possible deal that we can with the United States. We've already got the best deal of any country in the world. Significant areas such as 0% on pharmaceuticals. We've got the best deal on steel of any country, 25%. I think we've negotiated this process extraordinarily successful up to now. We still have to get to the final text, and I'm confident that we're going to be doing that in the coming months.
So the letter that we're publishing from you today says that you're confident that the 10% tariff rate is going to remain in force. My understanding is that the legal basis for that tariff today is Section 122 of the Trade Act 1974, and therefore these tariffs expire after 150 days. So what confidence have you got that the 10% tariff is actually good for the long term rather than simply the next 150 days?
Well, some of the specific lines we've already agreed on, and we don't think they're affected at all. So, for instance, the 0% on pharmaceuticals that I referred to, steel, automotives, the quota that's been agreed as well, the agreement on beef. We think all of those are settled parts of the agreement, and we don't think that they'll be touched. Of course, following the Supreme Court ruling, we've got to... We're still trying to work out, as I think the United States of America are, precisely where that lands everybody, and that's part of the ongoing negotiations that we're having. And I mean, it's one of the things I'll be discussing with my counterpart later on this evening.
What's your working assumption about the legal basis for the 10% tariffs that are in place today? Is it the 1974 Act, or is it some other made-up bit of legal basis?
Go on,
Kate. On that. So we do think it is the 1974 Act, Section 122 of the 1974 Act. I don't think that we have complete clarity on exactly how that will work from a legal perspective and whether or not the US may change that tariff rate for some countries and not for others, because they have indicated that they may look to increase that rate for some countries. It's not entirely clear to us exactly how they will go about that.
Including us?
I think the suggestion is it may go up to 15% for some countries. Unclear whether or not that would be for the UK. Obviously, we would want to maintain that at 10% for the UK, and they may well do that for partners with whom they have a trade agreement.
But it's worth saying that we've not had any indication that that is what is going to happen. Yeah. That we will be going to 15%. Yes. And that's why I wrote to you as I did.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, there are UK companies that are now paying this 10% tariff today on a legal basis which sounds unclear. Why can't they sue to get their money back?
Go on.
Yes. So I think the way that it would work is that importing companies would potentially be due refunds under the Supreme Court ruling. But again, it is not entirely clear how that process will work. I think it's in the public domain that there is a suggestion that it may be possible for companies to secure refunds, but that would be for companies that have paid that tariff, and that would be companies that are importing goods in the US.
It's not for the UK exporter.
No. But if I'm importing Range Rovers, I can potentially go to court to get the tariff money back.
Well, no, because automotives is already, we already think that that's sorted.
Okay. Well, one bit that isn't especially sorted is steel.
Can I just go back, because you asked me a question?
Well, yes, go on. At the top, about the broader picture.
Yes, I think you were asking, and I've got Jimmy Maxton running through my mind from 1935, which is, if you can't ride two horses at the same time, you better get out of the circus. And the truth of the matter is that since the UK left the European Union, we have a new responsibility, which is trade, and we have to be able to ride an awful lot of horses all at the same time to be able to secure outcomes from the UK, and that is what we're trying to do. So, and I think we've done quite well. Not only we've already had conversations at a previous session in relation to India, but we've also got a better deal done with Korea. We're working on Switzerland, Turkey, Greenland, and the GCC, and the UK, and the EU and the US at the same time.
The challenge we have is, notwithstanding the heroism of all that work, the OBR is forecasting the trade deficit to widen to 3% of GDP from 2027 onwards. And so, strategically, all of your work is not moving the numbers, it would seem.
No, so obviously there are two different ways that economists look at balance of trade. Some in the United States of America, for instance, would argue that if you have a negative balance of trade, that is a major long-term problem for the country. Some would also point to the fact that for the cost of living in the UK, if we are able to access goods from elsewhere and bring them into the UK and keep the cost of living down and tackle inflation, that is a good thing. Of course, I'm very focused on two things. One, the fact that we have a big surplus in relation to trade and services around the world, and that's why it's all the more important that when we're trying to agree FTAs around the world, that we focus on that work and unleashing that.
Okay, well let's just look at the export numbers then. So 2026 exports decline 0.3%, 0% in 27, positive 0.2 in 28, 0.1% in 2029. At the same time as the global economy is growing at about 3.3%, our export growth is really quite limited. So does that tell you anything important that you need to change about the export strategy that we're pursuing if the OBR is concluding actually the trade numbers are not materially improving?
So I said earlier that I had two things that I was focused on. The first one was about services, and I'm not sure whether the figures you gave just there are ones for goods or
exports
for services.
Exports of goods and services, yeah. Right. Table 8.2 in the OBR spring forecast.
Thank you. But the second point I was going to make was around exports. You've heard me say before that I find it worrying that only 1 in 10 UK businesses exports. I think one of the strengths of what we did last year was we focused on the 8 key industrial sectors where we think there are real economic opportunities for this country. Just one of them, for instance, is creative industries. Creative industries last year saw 5% growth, nearly 5 times, or more than 5 times bigger than the whole of the rest of the economy's growth, and that's one of the areas where we have significant increase in exports. So we need to work on where we are good, on what we are good at, maximise that. But I'm also conscious that in relation to the European Union, because that was the other first question that you asked me, which I haven't fully responded to, we need to be able to achieve as frictionless trade in as many different sectors as we possibly can. I'm not naive about the timeline for that, because it is phenomenally tough and difficult to negotiate with a bloc which is so many countries all at the same time. But that's the piece of work that I think we need to unleash. I don't know whether Amanda...
No. Nothing further.
Well, I think maybe just the final question before I hand the floor to Mr. Madders is just about the energy price shock that is now unfolding thanks to events in Iran. I mean, presumably this is going to knock the cost base for the UK into a pretty serious position. What measures are you beginning to contemplate at the department for how we can keep industrial energy costs down if oil stays at this elevated price range? So
obviously this is one of the things that we've been considering. Some of that relationship in relation to specific energy prices obviously lies with DESNZ rather than with ourselves, but we need to consider what the knock-on effects might be for other sectors. It's one of the things we're already focused on. I can't remember whether it's Kate or Amanda that will speak to that in a moment. One of them will, but and there are other issues. Incidentally, I was talking to some of my Gulf counterparts yesterday and today, and one of the issues for them is access to food. So there's a whole series of issues which are impacted by the effective closure of the Straits of Hormuz. We need to work as fast as we can. I mean, it'd be good to get to a resolution of the situation in Iran so that everything can open up again. But in the meantime, we are, and I can't remember which of you is going to... It's Kate, sorry.
Okay.
Kate, go on.
What are the options on the table to help UK firms with energy costs now?
Well, I would just say that we are obviously in the early stages of this at the moment. monitoring and keeping an eye on what's going on. It's clear that over the last few days, the impact on oil prices in particular has been very significant. So there is work going on across government to have a look at the current the options that we have, the programs that we have, especially I think from our perspective, to support businesses, because that's where we would come in on the DBT side. But at the moment, those are plans that are being discussed across government, so I don't have any additional information that I can share with the committee about the specific direction of travel.
But government is reviewing options for helping business with elevated energy costs.
So at the moment we are doing some work with other government departments on how this might be affecting businesses, particularly obviously energy intensive industries. That's a key concern from our perspective, but we are still evaluating what the possibilities are. And of course, one of the big issues is how long this will go on. Obviously, it feels at the moment like things are not coming to a conclusion, but duration is a sort of critical factor in the overall impact, and therefore what support might be needed.
Okay. So Chris, when have you asked for options to be on your desk by?
I'm not going to set a timeline for options being on my table, because it's not only my responsibility, it's not only our department, it's across government. But I just wanted to say one other thing, which is another aspect which is my responsibility, which is the person who's probably rubbing their hands with glee most at the moment is Vladimir Putin. And so we need to think about the impacts that there are on the sanctions issues that we were talking about a week ago as well.
Well, one of those energy intensive sectors is steel, where tariffs are still not where they need to be. Tariff protection is still not in.
Indeed. Good afternoon. So on the 10th of February, we had Russell Codlin, the Commercial Director of Tata Steel, give evidence. I'm sure you're aware of what he said to this committee, which was that we have 2 months to save the industry. That was a month ago. He was very clear that there needed to be a tariff regime introduced. He said, and I quote, "I'm not quite sure why we're not acting quite as fast as we need to, but time is running out." That was a month ago. Obviously, things have not got any better in the meantime. When will we see tariffs?
Well, the existing safeguard, which we inherited from our membership of the European Union, as you know, Mr. Madders, runs out at the end of June. And we have said several times in public, and I will say again today, that we will have a set of steel trade measures after that. We haven't quite dotted the I's and crossed the T's yet, but I hope to do so in the near future. And that will sit alongside our steel strategy, which Minister Chris MacDonald has been developing as well.
Okay, but Tata is saying we need something in place by April, so that's a couple of months where there's no action, and we're being told the industry is going to collapse if nothing's done. So how can you be confident that doing something in June is going to be enough?
I think what they meant was that they want an announcement by April, because obviously between April and the end of June there will be the existing safeguard, and they want an announcement about what will happen from July in relation to trade steel measures, which, as you will know, under WTO rules will be constructed whatever we do in a different way. But I don't have any intention of disappointing Tata Steel.
So we can expect an announcement within the next month.
They wanted something by the 1st of April, and I'd be very upset if we hadn't announced something by then. I'm very reluctant to. I'm not the person who gets to decide when announcements are made, but we are very close to dotting the I's and crossing the T's. I should just say that because this may be an area that you want to ask me about, one of the issues that is of concern is, of course, that the EU announced its trade measures, and that would have because it was cutting the quota by 47%, and if that were applied on an equal footing to the UK, that would be of significant harm to us. So part of what I've been engaged in conversations with Commissioner Šefčovič, as has the Secretary of State and others, is trying to make sure that we have some kind of deal between us, because frankly the problem with steel isn't the UK, it isn't the EU, for that matter, it isn't Canada or the United States of America. It's overcapacity in other parts of the world where there is unfair subsidy. And that's why I think the worst of all possible worlds will be if we were in a situation where the measures that we put in harm Europe and the measures that Europe puts in harm us, and that's a bit of a a zero-sum game.
Okay. So you're confident those circles can be squared, are you?
I'm doing my very best.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm conscious of in relation to negotiating with the EU is that I would obviously prefer always to move much faster. I prefer to move much faster on everything, basically. I irritate officials a lot. And one of the difficulties with the EU, for instance, on the SPS deal is, whilst we announced, that we wanted to negotiate this last May, the EU didn't get its mandate or the Commission didn't get its mandate from the EU until November, and so we couldn't properly start negotiating until November. You could say, in relation to the United States of America, the United States last year decided to start negotiating with all the countries in the world all at the same time. USTR isn't an enormous department, and that provides some challenges for them to be able to, get through a lot of negotiations.
Okay, but I think the key
time.
thing that we're concerned about is that there won't be an air gap between the expiry of the current steel safeguards on the 30th of June and the implementation of new safeguards. Is that the assurance you can give us?
100%.
Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, that's not me announcing a tariff. It's just saying I can be absolutely certain that there will not be a gap.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Dan Aldridge.
Thank you. We've heard differing things from politicians, civil servants and business when it comes to the technology prosperity deal. Is the tech prosperity deal operational as you see it? And could you give us an update on where we are with that?
So there's lots of bits of it, and it's a series of chunks, and bits of it are still progressing, and bits of it are, I think the Americans themselves have used the term paused. But in relation, for instance, to our work on quantum research, we're still moving forward. So as I say, there are bits of...
Because we were told quantum benchmarking work has stalled since the suspension. The National Quantum Programme starts on the 1st of April, but details are still unpublished.
My understanding is that the research that's been done with TAE Technologies and the UK Atomic Energy Authority's joint venture partnership to commercialise fusion technology in the UK is still proceeding.
Okay. You have evidence to the contrary, but Mr. Aldridge, do proceed.
I think so. What would be really useful is, from your perspective, where are there areas that are not going so well, and where are the things that the areas that you think we should be doing more work on?
I mean, this is primarily a DCIT lead rather than DBT, but obviously because some of it was announced around the same time as our work on the economic prosperity deal, it sometimes has got conflated with it. And I'm happy to make sure that you get any information from DCIT that you want. I don't know, Kate, whether there's anything you want to add?
I mean, the only thing that I would add is that obviously a large part of the deal is really about facilitating company-to-company cooperation, business-to-business cooperation. It's our understanding that quite a lot of that is still continuing. There are official dialogues and processes, and some of that isn't proceeding as fast as we would like, but a lot of the benefits through collaboration between companies are still sort of being realised. So obviously we want to get things going across the board as much as possible, but I don't think it's right to say that nothing is happening under the Tech Prosperity deal.
Is the Tech Prosperity deal an effective package, or is it simply repackaged, rebranded business-to-business negotiations? Is it things that were already going to happen anyway between businesses, or is there something substantive in addition to the deal?
Well, it's a chunk of things which have been enabled by cooperation between the two governments, which wouldn't have happened without that cooperation, though they are in the commercial interests of both ends of the equation.
So is it suspended or not suspended?
So I would say that work is ongoing on chunks of it, and I note that the US has said that it is paused, but there are substantial chunks of it which are still proceeding.
Okay, so their reporting was that the United States was frustrated at the UK's unwillingness to address non-tariff barriers on food and industrial goods, but you're saying that frustration has not translated into a complete dead stop across the piece.
Well, it's certainly true that we have discussion. I've not seen these two things connected myself, and I don't think we have, but Kate will answer in a moment. But it is certainly true that one of the things that the US has regularly said and said in Senate hearings and so on, is that they want us to dismantle some of our, what they call our non-tariff barriers. We would call our non-retardant materials regulation, or our regulation on food standards, or whatever. And we think that we are global leaders in many of these areas, and they're simply not part of what we would negotiate away.
I see. There was supposed to be a ministerial level working group set up within 6 months. I assume that's not been achieved yet.
I certainly haven't been to one. Kate?
So I think that would be a decent lead, but that has not happened yet. So I think it's at that level that we would like to see progress really kick-started again, but that doesn't mean that nothing else is happening.
Okay, but today there's no timetable for establishing that ministerial working group?
Not that I'm aware of, but we can check and come back to you.
If we've got anything different from DSIT, we'll let you know.
I think it's just that the lack of clarity on some of this is causing confusion with some of the business partners, so it'd be useful if we can join it up at some point.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Well, let's get into some of those barriers. Mr. Madders.
Yeah, so the PM Special Envoy, Bryant has said, and I'll quote him, "We're working through long-standing red lines on economic security, food standards, agricultural approaches and third country interactions." Obviously quite a lot in that. What are the difficulties in resolving these issues?
Well, some of them are inevitable areas where there might be red lines on either side of the conversation. So, the classic instance, which has been referred to many, many times in the public domain, is this issue around, it tends to be characterised as hormonal beef and chlorinated chicken and so on. And we've made it absolutely clear from the very beginning, and I'm quite happy to reiterate it today, that we will not surrender our food standards in any of these negotiations. And as I say, we're not intending to do the same in relation to our standards on other products as well. So that sometimes that ends up being a kind of red line meets red line, and that inevitably ends up with difficulties.
So how are you going to break that?
So I have sort of two things that run through my mind, and I'm not doing most of the negotiation in relation to the United States of America. Most of those conversations have been had either by the Secretary of State or by our chief negotiator working under Kate's team, or with Varun Chandra. But I think it's exactly the same as any other discussion. There's a poem by Browning, Toccata of Galuppi, where he says, "Hark the dominant's persistence till it must be answered to." And sometimes you just have to hold your line. You just have to keep on going and keep on going and keep on going and keep on going until the people on the other side of the table realise that it is genuinely a red line. And then some other areas, you have to go a bit more like Jimmy Durante. You've got to give a little, take a little, and let your poor heart break a little.
Okay. I can't work out what our American interlocutors are going to value most, whether it's your poetry or your musical repertoire. At some point you'll have to tell us.
It's a novel approach to trying to resolve the red lines, but...
Well, I think sometimes negotiation ends up happening between people. It's always between people, but personality is what ends up determining some of whether you get something over the line or not.
Some of these red lines have been very clear, and they're not going to change, are they? So how is it that these things are going to get to a resolution?
Well, I'm in a difficult position because I don't want to comment on the specifics of live negotiations for obvious reasons. I don't want to negotiate via the committee and into the public domain. I think these things are best done in a negotiating room, and that's what we're trying to do. I am, however, confident that we've done pretty well so far. I think we managed to get a deal on pharmaceuticals, which I was very sceptical would be possible at the beginning of those negotiations, because there seemed to be very hard red lines, and that was achieved. And I think there are other areas where we might have successes still to come as well.
Okay, well, I won't press any more on that.
Okay, John Cooper will, however, press on agriculture.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm maybe more Gravy Browning than Robert Browning, but I'm delighted to hear Schnozzle Durante getting his nose into the Business and Trade Committee.
And poor old Elizabeth Barrett.
channeling your inner Adam Smith, you talked earlier on about the things that we are good at, and agriculture is one of the things that we are good at. So what are our ambitions for agriculture in this trade deal with the US? What do you think that the big gains might be?
Well, we've obviously had one gain already in relation to beef, and I was being licked a lot by some beef cattle the other day on a farm down in Dorking, or outside Dorking, and that is, the US produces a great deal more beef than we do, but I think our product is materially different. It's for a very specific market, and I hope it's going to do very well. And the Secretary of State for DEFRA was out in the US to be able to celebrate that moment and to promote it. We've got our first agri trade person working in Washington trying to promote that part of the deal. Agriculture, of course, is not just agricultural products standing on their own, it's also food products, so quite often these are part of the equation. But I'm not sure of other things in the American deal in relation to agriculture, unless Kate's got anything to add.
So in terms of what we've already agreed, I think that's exactly right. It's primarily the beef quota, but we are in ongoing negotiations with the US in order to try and secure more access for UK products at lower tariffs than we currently have. They are essentially largely at a 10% tariff rate, so that doesn't put us at a huge disadvantage at the moment in comparison to the rest of the world, but we would like to make some gains on that. It's obviously not easy to do that because I think the US administration has not given us many signs that they are willing to go below that 10% threshold across the board, but obviously we're continuing to push for the best possible deal that we can get for British farmers.
We touched on the concerns about things coming over here. Chlorine-washed chicken, there's been a lot of concern about that, although I had chlorine-washed salad for lunch. Hormone-treated beef and pork and turkey, which are treated with chemicals which make them more lean, but which are banned in many countries. You're sure that our protections against that are sufficiently robust?
We have extremely rigorous food standards in the UK, and we're not going to surrender them. This, incidentally, doesn't just apply in relation to the United States of America. I remember when we were having the conversation in relation to India, there was some question about cheese, and it's exactly the same set of issues. We have strong food standards, treatment of animal standards, and we will abide by them.
Thank you, Jim.
We took evidence from the British Standards Institution that warned that the American approach to regulation was a real threat to us, and in particular they raised the prospect of a hard border in Northern Ireland if we began to surrender our territory on this. Are you going to hold as firm on this regulatory approach question as you are on food standards?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Aldridge.
Yes, thank you. So both the UK and the US are working on the digital trade agreement. What are the government's objectives for that with the US?
Oh, go on, Kate. I'm still thinking about the last answer I just gave.
In terms of digital trade, we're really looking at areas where we can improve the current environment in terms of duties and so on that are paid, but also just creating less friction in digital trade across the two countries. So it's an element that we are looking into as part of the wider negotiations. I think that has been reasonably positive so far, and we think that there is more that we can be doing just to create less process around digital trade with US partners, and I hope that will be an element of what is finally agreed. And at the moment, there aren't insurmountable barriers, but we can still improve upon the current situation, I think, and just ensure that, because the digital trade is really about making sure that digital processes that support the trade in goods and services is able to proceed in a sort of a more frictionless environment, and that's been a key priority.
Sorry, and I should say, first of all, we have a data adequacy. It's not a data adequacy agreement in relation to the US. It's a bridge, I think it's called, which is important part of being able to allow localization of data protection and so on. Secondly, one of the areas where we cooperate with the US in relation to the WTO, which is coming up in 3 weeks' time, is in relation to trying to get a permanent moratorium on electronic commerce through the WTO. We didn't manage it at the last ministerial. I'd like to get it at this one. And both the US and the UK, generally around the world, want to have more digital trade elements to their free trade agreements or their agreements with other countries, because this is an area where we both can prosper.
I mean, there's two areas that are controversial. So you've got the UK Digital Services Tax, which I think looks at which President Trump used the term overseas extortion, which feels quite like hyperbole to me. But then the other area is the Online Safety Act and the push around freedom of speech from the US. How much work is going into each of those areas in terms of holding the British line on that?
I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because the first of those is a Treasury issue and the second of those is a DCIT issue. But having briefly been in DCIT as a minister for a year and a bit, my view is that the legislation that was introduced under the previous government probably won't be sufficient to last 3, 4, 5 years, but nonetheless was important. Yeah. And I don't see that as a free speech issue. And in relation to the digital tax, that is a matter for Treasury, but the Chancellor of the Exchequer has made it clear that people should pay their fair share of tax.
Can I just add just one point on that? I did just want to make clear that although there's been a lot of speculation about both of these issues in the media in terms of the negotiations that we've been having, they've not actually been a major feature of our discussions, and online safety in particular has not really been a part of the discussions that we've been having with trade counterparts. That's not to say that these won't be things that will come down the track at some point in the future or through other channels, but it's not been an issue that our trade counterparts have really been pushing with us so far, especially online safety.
I think that's a really important thing for people to understand, because it's not dissimilar to the conversation that we were having earlier, where businesses see the political rhetoric and that feel that translates into practical work around trade agreements. So this is really important. Thank you.
So there is a lot of noise, and we tend to pretty much ignore it. We just plough on with trying to get the best possible deal we can. And that is what we get from the other side as well, to be fair.
Okay, so Lisa Nandy said in April 2025 that the Online Safety Act would not be weakened as part of the US negotiations. That is your position?
Yes.
Okay. On the digital services tax...
Sorry to just interrupt, but I mean, it's for the British Parliament to determine what the legislation should be in relation to that. And this is a common aspect. Some people ask this hasn't happened in this particular case, but sometimes people say, well, you've got to change this piece of legislation or that piece of legislation so as to get a deal over the line or whatever. I often have to point out, well, I'm sorry, but we have a legislative process. We have a democratic process in the UK, and this is the democratically arrived at position, actually, by that act agreed by both the previous administration who brought it in and us who implemented it.
But it sounds like you're not being asked to walk that back, and nor are you prepared to countenance walking it back.
No, it's British legislation. We brought it in, and I think it's necessary, and indeed we may need to go further, but that's a matter for DCIT to decide exactly how we go. Okay,
and then on digital services tax, so obviously the President Trump has labelled this overseas extortion. Tech UK told us that we know it's been on the table for these negotiations. It's forecast to raise about £1 billion in 2026, 2027. You are not considering weakening that revenue base at this stage as part of these negotiations?
As Kate has just said, I've not been in any of the rooms where myself personally, so I'm a bit hesitant about precisely what I can say. But so far as I'm aware, it's not been raised.
Okay, Kate, you have been in the room.
So it's not been a big feature of our negotiations on the trade agreement. That is the way that I would frame it. you're absolutely right that this is an issue of concern to President Trump and many of the people around him, and they have spoken to various bits of the UK government about their concerns about digital services tax. It's a Treasury lead, and as far as we're concerned, it's for the Treasury to pick that up with the US Treasury and to have a discussion with them about it.
Okay. Is it your understanding of the UK Treasury position that this is a red line for them?
So I don't know the ins and outs of the Treasury position. I don't believe that they've got into a negotiation with the US government on this at the moment, but I think it's for the US Treasury to take that up with our Treasury.
I think the Chancellor's been asked directly about it in the Chamber, so I would incline to go with whatever she said.
Okay, thank you. Justin Madders.
Yeah, so we had evidence from quite a few investors who were generally very positive about the sort of broader conditions. There's obviously market demand for data centres in particular, but they said, you know, the political stability, the rule of law, the sort of in focus on investment from government were all factors which were encouraging them to make the investments that they were doing, and kind of they were really saying that these deals weren't actually deal breakers for them. They were already making these investments anyway. So when we get statements that the government's going to create 7,600 more jobs from the technology prosperity deal, is it the case that actually those were jobs that were going to be created anyway?
Well, no, I don't think that would be fair to say that. I think that, I mean, I wasn't involved when this went through, but my understanding is that as I said earlier, because the British government, working with the US government, was creating an environment in which people felt confident about making those investments, they were able to proceed. Similarly, you know, when we had the state visit, I think it was 150 billion. It was the biggest state visit set of announcements ever. You know, some of those were investments which people might have brought forward earlier, but they were very happy to be brought together into a package, and they're proceeding.
Yeah, I think that was the sort of flavour we got, that these things were things that might have been brought forward were sort of being accelerated by this. But what we're trying to understand is whether there's anything specifically new in terms of investment that is as a result of this deal.
Well, they're all new investments, and I'm sure that if the investments were cancelled, everybody will be blaming the government. So it seems only fair that if the investments are brought forward, that is a sort of vote of confidence in Britain as a place to make long-term investments. And one of the things that I think we are very keen as a department to say is not only that we are there to be as strong a voice for business as we possibly can, but we also want to provide the stability, long-term stability that enables, and predictability that enables people to make investments in the UK.
Absolutely. But there have been some investments cancelled, which we'll come on to in a minute. But in terms of the jobs that are going to be created, is the department keeping a track of that to see whether the sort of promises made are actually delivered?
Yes, very much so. I mean, it's slightly early days because some of these, it's only a few months ago that some of these were signed up to. But the £90 billion investment pledge from Blackstone, the £3.9 billion investment from Prologis, the £1.5 billion from Palantir, and so on. All of these are being tracked by the Office for Investment, but it's just a little bit early to be specific about giving you further information.
You can give us updates on that when more information.
Certainly, that is the whole purpose of the Office for Investment. There's no point in making an announcement and then it not leading to anything.
Okay, thank you.
When we asked Prologis for more detail of their investment, they did flag that you had conflicting regulations and decisions that were being taken by what they call their quangocracy in this country. Who's in charge of deconflicting those kind of problems? Is it you? Is it Lord Stockwood? Who's the quarterback for this?
Well, it slightly depends on who it comes to sometimes, but it would normally be Jason Stockwood, Lord Stockwood. But, I mean, I think all of us in the department, whenever we come across these kind of problems, want to do two things. First of all, to try and unlock whatever we can immediately, if that involves speaking to other departments or whatever, or local government. and secondly, learn from that problem about wider problems that there might be in terms of the regulatory burden. As you know, we've set ourselves a target of cutting the regulatory burden cost by 25%. And that is not an easy task, because everybody's very good at coming up with new regulations and not very good at finding ones that we should let go of.
Okay, well, we might just share with you the Prologis correspondence when it is published tomorrow to ask for your reflections on how problems like this are resolved. But let me first turn to John Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at pharma and life sciences, experts across health, academia and civil society wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister saying that there should be an urgent pause on any plans to strike a deal with the pharmaceutical industry in the US that involves increasing the amount of money that the NHS spends on medicines. And notwithstanding that, AstraZeneca has said that the US UK pharmaceutical deal is not sufficient for them to pick up their £200 million Cambridge investment. What can you tell us about whether the UK has gained more than it's given away in this area?
Well, first of all, other countries are... Well, first of all, I don't think people anticipated that we would get to 0% because President Trump had said quite a lot of things about pharmaceuticals and the fact that Americans were paying more for drugs than we were in the UK. Secondly, I would point to the argument that Lord Vallance, Patrick Vallance, has been making for some time, in fact, independent of this discussion with the United States of America, around the fact that we have been slow over recent years to bring new drugs to people through the NHS, some of them life-saving drugs, and that's partly because we've not been spending enough on drugs, and we've not been spending enough on drugs to enable pharmaceutical sector to feel that they have a long-term future in the UK. So I think that this is a good deal, and I say this partly as somebody who back in 2019 I had stage 3 melanoma, and I was very fortunate because I was diagnosed with it 1 week after the UK had sanctioned the use of targeted and immunotherapy in an adjuvant setting for melanoma. So I think that my life relies on the fact that that drug was able to come on board. Now, I want that to be able to be possible for many more people through the NHS in the UK.
Yeah,
so I think it's a good deal.
I'm delighted you're here to tell us about this.
Thank you.
But you will.
If you don't sound it.
You will accept. Yeah, absolutely, from the bottom of my heart. But you will realise. I mean, that's very concerning to hear that R&D in this area, in this country, is lagging so far behind. I mean, that's a terrifying prospect, isn't it? And is the answer to that to get the NHS to pay for more drugs? Is that really the answer?
No, so I don't think R&D is lagging behind. I think we've done phenomenally well, but we've been living off a past legacy, and we've been living off the fact that the NHS is able to buy drugs at a significant discount because it is such a large single buyer. But as Patrick Vallance has said, one of the great strengths of striking this deal is that we will be paying the right amount for our drugs, enabling more people to have earlier access to drugs, and thereby enabling those companies to think this is a really good place to be able to make those investments. I met with the people who set up BioNTech, or BioNTech, I'm not never sure how to say it, a German couple, they're doing the vaccines for melanoma. They've made significant investments in the UK because they believe that this is the best place, both academically and in terms of being able to take things to market in the world to be able to develop those new technologies. So I'm not worried about R&D. Of course, AstraZeneca have made their own decisions, but they've also we've enabled part of our discussions in China have enabled them to be making new investments there as well.
Thank you.
Before we move on to a different kind of medicine, I just want to underline this point. The chief executive of AstraZeneca has said the deal is a very positive step, but won't be sufficient to resume the paused $200 million investment in Cambridge. I mean, the new money for more expensive drugs is welcome in and of itself, but it doesn't appear to be reversing the decisions of big US-based and other life science companies. So actually, do we need to go further on this?
Some of that discussion is for DCIT, but I remember 18 months ago, a lot of life sciences companies were threatening to leave the United Kingdom and not talking about coming here. And I think that this deal has reassured a great many of them.
Okay. I guess time will tell. The full legal text of the pharma deal has not been published, is it? Do you plan to publish it?
Okay.
So,
I'm not telling you to publish it. I'm just saying you
hurry
answer.
up and publish it. Yeah, so we are working with the US on securing the full legal text so that we can make that available.
Okay, so the plan is to publish it.
So I don't know that the plan is currently to publish it, but I think that would be our aspiration.
I mean, it's £1 billion worth of extra cost to the UK taxpayer, so I think Parliament might want to have a look.
As you know, my preference would be towards transparency, but this is one of those areas where it takes two to tango. So being able to publish it will require not only analysing some of the commercial sensitivities that there might be, but also persuading the US to agree with us. I'm quite happy to write.
Maybe we could ask you to maximise what you can publish in that case. Mr. Cooper, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. And this is a subject close to my heart and also to my liver, Scotch whisky. So Scotch at the moment's 10% tariffs in the United States. There's a potential for that actually to increase later this year to as much as 25% in a complicated tit for tat which involves aircraft, slightly improbably. But obviously that's very worrying because that 10% tariff, the Scotch Whisky Association say that's dropped volumes to America by something like 15%. That's something like, they say, £4 million per week. I mean, this is quite remarkable if that was to more than double. So how are we with Scotch? Where are we with that?
I wish I could give you an answer, and the truth of this is that both those elements are still in negotiation.
Okay, I mean that's...
Sorry, I mean I'm very aware, and we talk regularly to the Scotch Whisky Association, and the. And it says here, sorry. So we're trying our best. We're trying our best, and I can't read it. Okay. We're trying our best to get as good a deal as we possibly can.
Negotiations are ongoing. This is not one of these things that's paused or chunks of it are going on. You're still in negotiations.
Completely, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, Kate, whether you wanted to add anything. It's obviously a huge number. This was 600 million pounds of lost exports between 2019 and 2021 when the 25% tariff was in place. I don't know what the current tariff is costing us, but presumably it won't be cost-free. I mean, what are the prospects of getting a deal? I mean, I think we have thrown everybody in our national armoury at this problem, from what I understand, but it sounds like we haven't got something over the line yet.
It is a high priority for us to secure a reduction in the current 10% tariff, and it is also a priority for us to try and resolve the large civil aircraft dispute in a way where we would not be facing increased tariffs on whisky. The thing that I was going to point out was that thanks to the Prime Minister's visit to China, we have also secured a reduction in the tariff that we are paying on whisky exports to China from 10% to 5%. So that was a really significant win for the whisky industry. Other significant wins through the whisky industry through the India deal. So we are doing everything that we can on whisky, but we are absolutely still on the case with the US.
And India, you know, is going down from 150% to 75%, and then down, in later years down to 40%. We've also secured geographical identification in Argentina, and you know, we for Scotch whisky. We work on this all the time. It feels like they're one of our best clients.
It's such a big focus, it sometimes confuses us as to why food and drink production is not one of the IS8, but that will be a matter for a later session. Let's now switch focus to Europe. I appreciate that your colleague is not with you, Nick Thomas-Symonds. There is an issue, obviously, for parliamentary scrutiny of trade with Europe, because the understanding that was given to the liaison committee is that scrutiny of government negotiations with Europe would sit with relevant committees. We obviously scrutinise the trade relationship with Europe, and so we are disappointed that Nick Thomas-Symonds was not able to present himself today as requested in order to answer questions. So I'm afraid you'll have to do your best, even if it is not completely your policy responsibility. But Mr. Maynard's going to open the questions.
Thank you. Please could you give us an overview on where we are now with regard to negotiations on SAFE, on SPS and on the internal energy market?
So if I do SPS first, SPS, we, as I said earlier, the the Commission got their mandate in November for negotiation on SPS, so that process is we are undergoing at the moment, and we've said that we want to complete that by the time of the next EU summit, which will be later on this year. We still hope to be able to have all the legislation in place, in the next 18 months, 2 years, whatever, something like that. But as I say, that's partly dependent on the timing with the EU, and I am conscious that there are very significant issues that do have to be addressed, and there's an awful lot of legislation that might need to follow from it. In relation to SAFE round 1 is completed, and we're not part of that. I think you're aware of that. That doesn't mean that British businesses can't take part. British businesses can take part, but only in the same way as third-party countries would be able to do so. I think the SAFE negotiation said one thing to me, which is you don't just accept any old deal that's on the table. If the price is too high, then it's not good for us. Then you don't sign up, and that's where we got to with SAFE. You asked a third.
Just sticking with SAFE for a moment. So, I mean, Canada is rumoured to have got into SAFE for a grand total of 10 million, I think, euros. We had an offer price of 6 billion. What do you think is going on there? And what's our way through on that?
There's a technical reason why basically what Canada was being offered in proportion to what they were seeking to achieve was very similar to the UK, which we're happy, if you want all the detail on that, we're happy to write to you. But Amanda's about to give some of it. But as I say, we British businesses are still able to participate, but in a different way. Amanda.
I'm going to add something on SPS, if I might, as well, while I have the chance. Yes, I mean, you've essentially said it, Minister, but Canada and the UK have very different defence industrial bases, and therefore we're operating and negotiating on a very different basis. And the outcome of the negotiations reflected that. I don't think my understanding was the number was that low for Canada, as you suggested, but nonetheless it was, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was not as low as tens of millions. I thought it was more than that. But the resulting offers were different, and as the Minister has just said, we'd gone into the negotiations in good faith, but it didn't work from the UK's national interest in terms of the overall value for money, and a decision was made on that basis. But these particular negotiations are led by our colleagues in MOD. On SPS, whilst I had the chance, I should say that my colleagues in DEFRA published today a list of EU regulations which they expect to align with as part of the outcome of the SPS agreements. They've done that on the basis of helping businesses to prepare. It's not definitive in terms of the list, that all of those regulations will indeed be covered, or indeed there may be some that are not on that list that are not covered, but it is now enabling businesses to understand the shape of the agreement and what they may need to be prepared for. So that was published by DEFRA colleagues who lead that particular negotiation today.
Okay, and the third one was IEM, Internal Energy Market, or Electricity Market. Right?
The electricity trading market, yeah.
Go on.
So similarly, the EU only reached their mandate for that negotiation in November. These negotiations are being led by colleagues in DESNES. Obviously, we can see there's a great opportunity for the UK to be participating in that internal electricity market, but particularly helping support investment into the renewable sector. But those negotiations are currently underway and ongoing.
Okay, thank you. And just taking those three and then kind of adding in kind of youth experience, youth mobility and ETS. If the teams, DBT and others, get those over the line in the next 6, 12, 18 months, which I guess is probably your goal, what are your hopes?
Earlier than that.
Well, great, yeah. Even better. What are your hopes after that? In terms of you've got the rest of this Parliament. What's the Labour government hoping to achieve in Europe? If we get those put away, What are your goals after that?
As much frictionless trade as is possible.
Okay, but just
so what are the frictions
Yep.
in different sectors? So you might have friction about business travel and people being able to do their business elsewhere in Europe. And some of that might be about mutual recognition of professional standards. Qualifications, sorry, yeah, thank you. Mutual recognition of professional qualifications. We're working on a series of sectors at the moment. There's a series of other standards, not just in relation to foodstuffs, but in relation to furniture and electronic equipment and so on, where I would like us to get to a position of as much alignment as possible, so as to be able to have as frictionless trade as possible.
And so if we got kind of business travel done, we got mutual recognition done, we got kind of sectors done, is that kind of our apex of the best we can hope for? Or are there other things beyond that which make sense that will help trade between us and the EU?
Well, those would be if you were to do that in all sectors, then that would be the job done in one sense. Though I suspect that you would I'm conscious that the time taken is always much longer than you think it's going to take. As for that matter, is accession to the European Union. In many cases it takes decades. Managing to get all the way through the acquis communautaire is a slow process. But I'm just trying to be entirely rational about what is achievable as fast as possible. And to some degree, the events of the last few years, all the way through from, I think, a greater recognition in the UK that Brexit was probably not the wisest thing we've done in our life for our trading arrangements, and the problems that there have been in international trade, whether that's because of the situation in Ukraine or the situation in the Middle East, or because of new tariff regimes or whatever, all of that I think has made people realise that the UK and the EU are in it together in the end. 46% of our trade is still done with the European Union, and that's despite coming out of the European Union. I've said privately, and I'll say publicly, it is possible, I suppose, in the next 3-4 years that it wouldn't ever be called this, but in Ukraine, the answer might be that UK boots might be alongside European boots. We might be fighting, or not fighting, but protecting Ukraine in effectively as we were in U4 in the Balkans. We might effectively be part of a European army. And then it would be very odd if we weren't able to trade fully and freely between one another. That it would seem to me would be us getting the world the wrong way round. I want us to be as ambitious as we possibly can in this sphere.
Thank you very much.
Is that view shared by either the Prime Minister or the Chancellor?
I've said these things several times in the past, and of course, I fully recognise the red lines that we have, which is that we're not joining a single market, we're not joining a customs union. Frankly, if we were to consider either of those things, I think it would be unlikely we'd be able to do those things in the next 10 years because of the timetable that these things take. But that is my understanding of is the view of the government. Amanda?
I wondered if you wanted to also just refer to EU CPTPP dialogue,
in
which you've been playing quite a big role.
Yes, thank you very much, Amanda. Well, you could say it.
Here all day.
Look, part of my anxiety is that, in essence, I'm a free trader. I believe that free trade, where you can possibly, preferably free and fair trade, so you have to consider responsible business conduct as well to make sure that you've got a world trading system that works for everybody. But my anxiety is that if the World Trade Organization were to fall on its face in the next few months, or if it were to be diminished, then that will be a long-term problem for trade and for prosperity, for not just for the UK, but in particular for some of the poorer countries in the world. And that's a problem for all of us. I think the disruption that would fall if the WTO were to collapse would be equivalent to closing the Panama Canal. And we can prevent that. So the relationship between the EU and the CPTPP at the moment, which would represent something like 35% of world trade, I think is a really positive possible development.
Just one of that. So the appellate body essentially is defunct. Stop me if that's too harsh a term. So there's quite a lot of mutterings about the Cameroon meetings, and so could you scope out what the UK is thinking in terms of how you would like the WTO to look like if there were changes? What reforms do you think are necessary to get it into a functional entity?
We appreciate the policy paper that was published, I think, today, with quite a punchy interview in the Financial Times. I don't think there is an oral statement proposed for this yet, although that would obviously be a good idea. But the policy paper that was published, is pretty high level. So what are the real ambitions the UK is bringing to the table?
Well, I think there are only about 6 countries that have produced a paper for the WTO so far. The US was early out of the doors, and then the EU, and we've joined that group now. Part of our rationale is we certainly want to see reform of the WTO so that it survives and meets the challenges of today. A classic instance is the fact that it's not managed to get the electronic commerce moratorium over the line at the last ministerial, and it only meets every 2 years. And so we need to have a process which enables it to reflect and make more decisions more frequently. Secondly, it needs to be able to allow plurilaterals where they're not doing any harm to anybody else to be able to function under WTO rules. Thirdly, I think we need to look at how we make decisions, because consensus can be a dangerous stricture and can mean that you never make a decision about anything if one person in the room can effectively stop everybody else. I think we haven't got a fully functioning appeal process, and that needs to be back in the equation. We need to make sure that it's agile and accessible. I personally would change some of the language that is used in the existing system. The most favoured nation, I'm not meant to say this, I know, but the most favoured nation concept, which doesn't mean most favoured nation at all, it means everybody's equally mostly favoured. Some of this makes it incomprehensible to the vast majority of people in the world, and I think some of that needs to change as well.
Okay. Anything further on that? No? Okay. So that's quite a sweeping view of some reform at the WTO, and quite a sweeping view of where the alignment might be needed with the European Union. Are there particular sectors of the economy where you think the kind of alignment you set out is off limits with the European Union?
I can't think of any.
Okay. You've sketched out most of the economy.
I have.
Okay. Well, that's in line with what the Chancellor said. The Chancellor said in the LSE that some of this alignment is going to have to be unilateral, but some of it's going to be negotiated. But she's pretty ambitious for the amount of alignment that is being forecast, and presumably the new bill will make that much easier.
Look, I meet businesses who say to me, 10 years ago, I could easily send a sample of something that I want to sell in country X within the European Union. I could just send it in the post. Now I can't. So one company I visited last week, the director of the company actually flew to Madrid to take it to the licensing company so that they'd be able to... And that's just preposterous. And sometimes these are issues around how some of the EU rules are differently interpreted in different countries in Europe, and some of the work that we need to do is actually about our bilateral relationship with each of those different countries. It's one of the reasons that I was very keen that we have trade envoys for France, Germany and Italy. But we're doing work on, some recognition of qualifications in Spain, for instance, with accountants and so on, and we're doing specific work in Germany. So we need to do a lot more of that. But in the end, we need to be far more ambitious about our relationship with our nearest neighbour.
Okay. The European Union will ask for some concessions from us, both around mobility and money, but let's just turn to youth mobility first. Dan Aldridge.
It's something that has excited and captured the attention of lots of young people in Weston-super-Mare, as I imagine across the country. So in your view, what conditions must the UK impose on any youth experience scheme that it agrees with the EU?
Well, broadly speaking, of course, we have existing schemes with Australia and New Zealand, so it's the same kind of pattern of agreement that we want to have, and that's the process that we're negotiating at the moment. I should say, I know I've said this rather often today, Mr. Chair, but the this is a Home Office lead responsibility rather than DBT.
It's lucky you've such a broad range of ministerial office. But what is currently on the table in terms of numbers, age limits, access to home fees at British universities?
You're asking me to negotiate now publicly, and I'm not going to do that. I'm afraid I haven't got those details, and I won't be able to provide them to you.
Okay. Anything further on that, Mr. Aldrich? Okay, let's go to Mr. Madders.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're going to just do money first with Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, money. Yeah. We'll say that.
Is Mr. Cooper money?
Well, as you know, money talks. All money never says is goodbye. Looking at the EU Cohesion Fund, which basically is a method by which we trolley money to Greece, Estonia, Slovakia, Poland and others whose national incomes are below 90% of the EU average. We're expected to contribute to this cohesion fund now. Have we any sense of how much that's going to be as part of this reset, and how are we going to ensure value for money for that? I mean, this again seems to be a back to safe, and the idea that we're being asked to pay into things to access them. How do you balance that out, and what kind of sense?
Every time I go back to my constituency in the Rhondda, I drive down a road that was built with cohesion funds. But anyway, Amanda's going to answer that.
So the proposal that you're referring to was a proposal that came from the Commission that was set out in December of last year. It's fair to say that position doesn't represent a proposal by the government, and therefore I'm afraid there's no further comment I can make on it in terms of that.
Then, so it's something that's been proposed by the EU. They've invited us to put money in if we'd like to, or they would like us to.
They've set out a proposal that the Commission, the European Council, should open negotiations with the UK on contributing to that fund.
Okay.
That's the proposal.
And we've not picked that up. We're saying no, or we're still considering.
I'm unaware, and that would not be for DBT, I'm afraid.
I mean, sorry, but just to... where we are signing up to a scheme which has some administrative costs, where we're signing up to it, of course we accept the need that we would have to pay some share of that.
You've not ruled out in principle this then?
I don't think we've said publicly either yay or nay, but...
Well, I think the common understanding says that the UK has committed to, quote, appropriate financial contribution as part and parcel of both the ETS and the SPS participation. I mean, we've obviously heard from you today proposals for much wider dynamic alignment across a much wider slice of the economy, and you've also talked about ambitions to reboot the MRQ negotiations as well. We've heard directly from the Commission that as deeper alignment and integration is sought, then there will be an expectation both for more latitude on the movement of people, but also more money going into cohesion funds. And so, given that we've accepted the common understanding the appropriate financial contribution, we're just interested in what the range of figures might be.
Amanda?
I'm afraid I have no further information on that.
And nor do I, not for two reasons. One, because there's an element of speculation in that about where we might end up at the end of negotiations. And secondly, as I said, I think the only sort of firm principle I have is that where we are signing up to a scheme which has administrative costs, it would only be fair for us to be bearing our fair share of that burden.
Yeah.
Just to
anything further on that, Mr. Bain?
Oh, thank you. Well, just actually a practical question. So these contribution cohesion payments, is there like a clear table which says, okay, well, it's going to be this, look down here, and here it is, or is it just like completely black box, EU says you've got to pay this?
I've not seen any such, either A or B, actually.
So it is sort of unknown entirely, or are there any kind of public information available on how they calculate what?
I've not seen a request for money in any shape or form.
Okay, but you're not ruling out the principle of further UK financial contribution?
I'm not saying that we are making contributions to the cohesion funds, just to be clear. I am saying that when we join, for instance, there are administrative costs for Erasmus Plus, then obviously we would be sharing a part of that cost.
Yeah, okay. Anything further? No, Mr. Madders.
Yeah, so you've already sort of talked a little bit about the Made in Europe position, and you were right to identify that in automotive we have some more work to do.
Yep.
I think you suggested that fleets, vehicles, and also I think one or two other areas were currently excluded. My understanding is that actually if you take all the areas that aren't part of Made in Europe at the moment, that's over 50% of all exports from the automotive sector. So that's a big chunk to try and recover. So given that you have obviously been engaging this department very seriously on this, what's the analysis as to why we end up in this position where quite a large part of the automotive sector wouldn't be included?
Well, if you'd asked me before Christmas where I thought Made in Europe was going to end up, I was very worried that we'd be in a much worse place than we are now. And so, for instance, the element which refers to General Procurement Act, I think it is. I think it's Government Procurement Act. Sorry, is helpful, and I was pleased to see the version that got published. But in this relation to automotives, we are in a more difficult position. I'm determined to win this. I think sometimes we in the UK, since we've left the European Union, have thought that a negotiation with the EU just happens sort of one person to one person. But actually, it's the whole of the UK, all of our sectors, all of industry and everybody else, with the whole of the European Union, the member states, the Parliament, industrial sectors and the Commission. And that's what we need to engage in. And I'm looking for recruits to help in that campaign over the next few months.
Can I just add one small point, Mr. Badders, which is just to make sure everybody is clear of this. Autos is out for everybody, every other country that has been brought into the Made in Europe tent. Yeah. It's not that the UK has been singled out in that context. It is a general third-party exception, not a UK-only exception.
Yeah, I think for the people engaged in the £70 billion worth of trade, that remains a...
I totally take that point, but...
We're not minimising it, we're just saying what...
Clarifying.
And obviously at some point we would want to make sure that there are amendments to the Act before it ends up becoming finally going through its trilogy of processes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I didn't really get a sense from you there as to how, other than this is just applying to everyone, why those parts of the sector are being excluded, and critically, how we're going to win the argument that they should be back in.
So I think the most important part of the argument is that I think that this does damage to an awful lot of European businesses. That's the most important. I've said repeatedly, and I think that this is the argument that the Swedes made very convincingly just after the Secretary of State's visit. I think there was an article in the FT by the Swedish Prime Minister, I think I'm correct, and likewise some other European countries have made a very strong argument that this is actually dangerous for them.
And the CEO of BMW has made this point. Yeah.
Which is why I'm very hopeful that we will win this argument.
Yeah. Would you say there are quite a lot of member states who would be sort of in that place?
Yeah, from the conversations that I've had with my counterparts, I often, I think I'm going to have to persuade them for 10 minutes, and they start with it and they say it before I do, because it's as damaging for them as it is for us.
Okay.
I mean, there are, how many cars were made in one country? The final thing made just in one country. I mean, hardly any.
Absolutely.
If any.
Yeah. You see any people who might be advancing a country view within the EU?
I'm told that there are others making a different argument, and I'm visiting Paris on Tuesday.
Okay, well, I was going to ask whether you could update us after that particular visit.
I'm very happy to. I'm going to Brussels on Monday, I'm going to Paris on Tuesday, and I think on Wednesday I'm going to the Netherlands as well to meet members of the new government there.
Keep your travel plans.
Which are the most problematic parts of the Industrial Accelerator Act that you've seen? I mean, we've obviously looked at some bits that have been well discussed, like the power to exclude countries in whole or in part via delegated acts on reciprocity and economic security grounds, but are there other particular elements that you think pose most jeopardy to the UK economy?
I think I might have to write to you, because although I've read it all last week, it's not at the top of my mind, and but when I met with SMMT on Wednesday or Thursday, whichever day it was, the key point they were making to me was about access to fleet sales.
That's correct.
Anything further?
In terms of what you've seen so far, are there any unexpected wins that we've got? Obviously, the fact that we're still on the pitch in terms of automotive is a good thing, but are there other areas where you would say we've done better on the first sort of draft of this than you expected?
Well, this was the draft that was published was, I think, not the version that was anticipated in December, and the draft that was anticipated in December would have excluded us from everything. And that's why, notwithstanding the very significant concerns we have about the automotive sector, I was pleased last week to see the version that came out. I mean, I met with, I've forgotten his name, the chair of the committee in the European Parliament, German MEP, who was adamant. Yes, that's right. He was absolutely adamant that he was going to make sure that before the Act was published that it was going to be more sensible, and I'm very hopeful that he and the German government will be more helpful over the next version when it comes to going through committee and so on.
Okay, super. Thank you. Can we just come, Mr. Cooper, to the challenge of...
Sorry, Chair, if I might. I think there is actually a role for the Select Committee in relation to this, because if we want to win some arguments in the European Parliament, it may be that the Select Committee here might want to speak to the...
You'll be very pleased to hear that we have begun those discussions with our counterparts in the European Parliament. Mr. Cooper.
Actually, hauliers are concerned about the new EU entry-exit system, which is going to limit the amount of time drivers can spend in Europe, and in fact their fortnight in the Costas might actually count toward the time that they spend in the country for the purposes of their work as well. I've got hauliers in my constituency, Dumfries and Galloway, who are very troubled by that. There are other hauliers who say they're going to shift operations onto the continent. Now, that's not an option for my hauliers. Is the government concerned about this whole piece, and what might you be doing about that?
There's a whole series of issues relating to hauliers where we have some concerns. I'll ask Amanda to respond more fully in a moment, but and I've got hauliers in my patch who've raised similar concerns as well, and it's one of the things that we're discussing with Commissioner Šefčovič and his colleagues in the Commission. Just one other area which I know has been of concern to several select committees is around the hauliers' support for touring of theatre, opera, ballet and musical acts. Really important part of British acts being able to perform across the whole of Europe, because it's not just the visas for the individuals who might be performing, but also for hauliers as well, and that's one of the things that was referred to in the summit last year, and one of the issues that we're discussing with them. Amanda?
Yes, just to add to that, I mean, we're working with a number of EU member states to kind of raise the issue and the impact that it will have in their countries as well, in terms of supply chains and so forth, and looking at how we can work with them to reduce queues at entry points and elsewhere. We continue to talk on a regular basis to the sector as well, to make sure that we have fully comprehended the concerns that they have as we get more information and as they learn more. So everything from attending some of their leaders' forums, so colleagues from relevant bits of the department, and I know Minister MacDonald too had a roundtable earlier this year to talk about a wider range of challenges and opportunities that the sector is facing, not just in the context of the EU.
Thanks.
Okay, let's just round out with the EU reset bill. So I'm sorry Minister Thomas Simmons is not here to talk to it, but he's also told the House, I think, that this is not going to go through pre-legislative scrutiny either. We assume it's going to be presented in the King's Speech. We assume that it's going to give ministers pretty sweeping powers to dynamically align the UK economy with EU regulations without primary legislation. You've talked quite extensively today about some of the sectors that are priorities for you, like business mobility, MRQ, and you've set out quite a broad set of the economy where you want to see some alignment. Is the government actually going to produce a white paper for this bill, or is there going to be a position statement about which are the priority sectors for dynamic alignment?
This is the only time I'm going to do this, but I'm afraid that is a matter for the Cabinet Office, not for me. And so far as I'm aware, a decision has not yet been made.
Okay. On whether there will be a white paper or on what the priorities might be?
On any of the above,
Okay.
or indeed on the pattern of the legislation, or whether it will be in the King's Speech or any of those matters, some of which of course would be for the Leader of the House rather than for the Cabinet Office.
Okay. We will continue in our efforts then to have Mr. Thomas Simmons come in front of us in that case. Finally then, just on economic security. So as you know, the committee's been engaged in a lot of work on economic security. Thank you for your help with that. There are some areas where the EU is now slightly ahead of the UK in economic security matters. Arguably, one is around critical minerals, where the Resource EU plan was published before Christmas. The second is the anti-coercion instrument that's been developed. And the third is the aggressiveness with which the Commission has opened anti-dumping investigations when it comes to China. About 140 investigations already open. Where do you see the big opportunities for working together with the European Union to actually strengthen our economic security for the future?
Well, and I'm grateful, Chair, for your comment that 60% of what the committee had recommended in this area is being adopted by the government, and that is certainly the case. I know there are a couple of areas where we disagree, and I kind of wanted to make this offer to the committee, which is that if you can come up with a specific power that you think we need to take, rather than a generalised power, then I'm very happy to consider that and where we might take that forward. But when I read the report, I couldn't see a specific power that you wanted us to take, which is why we pushed back on that. But you know, we have a trade remedies process. I think it's you're going to. I can see you smiling, so you're obviously not very impressed by it. But okay. I think it has teeth, but anyway. And
improving it.
Sorry?
Improving it.
And we are improving it. I think there are further areas where, on the back of our business conduct review, we may want to align ourselves more closely with the EU, and for that matter, other countries. I think, as I referred to earlier, we need to do more in relation to anti-competitive practices around the world. But we've not had specific discussions with the EU around that. Sorry, Kate or Amanda, did you want to say anything? Neither of you.
Kate.
Oh yes, Kate.
Yeah, it's primarily me.
But it's sort of EU. So.
It's sort of
it's at the bar.
like many things. So we are obviously, as I think you know, Chair, we have a programme of work that we've sort of partially set out in the trade strategy to strengthen our trade defence toolkit. Our Secretary of State has given a strategic steer to the Trade Remedies Authority to lean in more. We have some measures in the Finance Bill on setting duty rates and giving the Secretary of State clearer power to initiate investigations, which at the moment is somewhat circumscribed. And we are also seeking views on whether or not we need to take new powers around economic coercion, potentially along similar lines of what the EU has, although we are one state and they are many, so it probably looks sort of slightly different, but we're looking at options around that. So I don't think that we would subscribe to the view that our toolkit is useless, but we are trying to strengthen it because we recognise that the world has changed around us.
Let me give you a specific example. If China once again constrains rare earth exports, say to the UK, what are we going to do about it? We've not actually been sort of targeted specifically by China on rare earth exports so much. Well, that is precisely that. I think that is a fair question to ask because that is precisely the sort of situation that we want to try and avoid, and we want to improve our toolkit in order to be able to respond to that. And that's why we are looking at taking more powers around adverse economic pressure and being able to if needed, raise tariffs around that kind of Wouldn't we stand a better chance of deterring that kind of behaviour if we were joined at the hip with the European Union on anti-coercion? They're a big bloc, we're a small country.
Well, it's certainly one of the things that that we are considering, and it's part of the equation. But of course, the opposite applies as well, which is would China bother doing taking such an action against us on our own? Probably not. So
they did to the Norwegians.
It did indeed, but Norway is anyway. I mean, one of the things that infuriates me is how on earth did we get to a place in the world where, despite the fact that critical minerals are deposited and extracted in large numbers of countries around the world, many of them are either 70, 80, 90 or 95% only processed in one country in the world.
Indeed.
How did we allow ourselves to get to such a daft situation? So that's why we produced our critical minerals strategy before Christmas. It's not my direct area of responsibility, but it is one of the pieces of work that I'm taking forward with Jeffrey Getman, who's my US counterpart, who I'm meeting in a few minutes, and as part of the work that the US wants to do in this.
But equally, if, as we know to be true, China is subsidising its industry 6 times more than we are, because the OECD has made clear through its magic database that those are the numbers, that poses a real threat to, for example, European manufacturing, European automotive, European offshore wind. I mean, how do we deter that kind of behaviour?
Well, indeed, but also, I mean, the free flow of trade is vital to everybody, and I think I saw.
We're not going to have any trade left if they wipe out our manufacturing industry with these subsidies.
True, and also, which is one of the reasons we also, of course, quite often focus on our services capacity, which is what part of our negotiation with China at the moment, to be able to unlock much more potential for UK trade in services to China. But and I've lost the track of where that.
Could we agree on this then, that there is a need to police Chinese over-subsidisation of its manufacturing base, and that does indeed pose a material risk to the European manufacturing base?
Well, of course, and if you go back to steel, this is the classic instance. I think, from memory, I might have got these figures wrong, but I think in 1970 we produced 27.8 million tonnes of steel in the UK. That was our peak. When we got to 2010, I think it was something like 9.4 million, and now it's 4 million. And I mean, the rapid fall in the last bunch of years is as dramatic as anything you can consider. Now, we need a steel industry in the UK, especially if we're going to be effectively rearming, because we know that we have to defend ourselves. Then we're going to be able to have to produce our own steel, and that's one of the reasons why I can be absolutely certain, to return to one of our earlier conversations, that we will be making sure that we protect and we want to get our steel industry back to the place where it was.
Well, we shall accept your challenge to engage in a debate about how we strengthen our anti-coercion and anti-competitiveness, anti-dumping measures, and we look forward to scrutinising the plans on critical minerals with the new critical minerals inquiry that we have agreed this afternoon.
You didn't have to coerce me.
I certainly didn't. We could do with a bit more coercion of some of your colleagues, however. But thank you very much indeed for coming in front of us today. We really appreciate your evidence. That concludes this session.